Fumaça was a retired police dog, famous for his exceptional skills and unwavering loyalty. Since he was adopted by Cris, a calm and kind-hearted man, Fumaça had become an essential part of his new owner's life. Every morning, without fail, the two would walk through the vast fields and dense forests around their home. It was their favorite time. Cris enjoyed the peace of nature, while Fumaça explored every corner with enthusiasm. But recently, something began to change. Fumaça, who had always been energetic and eager to go out, now showed signs of reluctance. He seemed to prefer lying in his comfortable bed rather than running through the fields. Cris noticed that Fumaça was becoming quieter and more restless at the same time. His eyes, which once sparkled with happiness, now looked sad and lost. He managed to make a great discovery that shocked everyone. It was impressive to see a dog become a hero. If you love animals, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel to always receive heartwarming stories about animals and their importance in human life. At first, Cris thought it might just be fatigue. After all, Fumaça was no longer a young, energetic police dog. But the situation became increasingly worrying. Fumaça began to whine for no apparent reason, refused to go on his daily walks. And when he did go out, he was nervous, constantly looking around as if something was deeply disturbing him. Concerned, Cris decided it was time to do something. He scheduled an appointment with the local veterinarian, Dr. Almeida, a trusted professional and family friend. Dr. Almeida performed a series of detailed examinations on Fumaça, but found nothing abnormal. "He is perfectly healthy," said the veterinarian, scratching his head. "He might be adjusting to the new environment, or perhaps he misses his old routine as a police dog." But Cris was not convinced. He knew Fumaça well enough to know that this change in behavior was too drastic to be just a matter of adjustment. Something else was happening, something that neither he nor Dr. Almeida could understand at the moment. Determined to uncover the cause of Fumaça's strange behavior, Cris began to pay more attention to the details. He noticed that Fumaça seemed especially agitated when they were near the forest. With this in mind, Cris decided that the next day he would take Fumaça for a walk on a different path, deeper into the forest, hoping that something might shed light on the mystery. The next morning, Cris woke up determined. He put the collar on Fumaça, and together they set off for a walk through the forest. Fumaça was visibly nervous, but followed Cris. As they walked, Cris closely observed Fumaça's behavior. As they ventured deeper into the forest, Fumaça abruptly stopped in front of an old, imposing tree. His fur stood on end, and he began barking frantically, staring intently at the tree. Cris tried to calm Fumaça, but the dog was determined. He sniffed the base of the tree and scratched the bark with his paws. Intrigued, Cris began to examine the tree more closely. He noticed that part of the bark was loose. With some effort, he managed to remove the loose piece, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside the compartment, he found an old bag, covered in dust and cobwebs. Cris carefully opened the bag and found a collection of old personal items, a pocket watch, some jewelry, and several black and white photographs. His heart raced. Something was clearly wrong. Cris knew he needed help to unravel this mystery and protect his loyal companion. Determined not to face this situation alone, Cris called his old friend and former police partner, João. While waiting for João to arrive, Cris felt a mix of anxiety and determination. When João finally arrived, he brought with him an air of determination and began examining the items carefully. These people look familiar. The mystery was just beginning. João, with his detective experience, held one of the photographs up to the light. "These people look familiar," he said thoughtfully. Cris, still absorbing the discovery, remembered a crucial detail. "There were some disappearances in the area a few years ago," he said, "people who simply vanished without a trace." João nodded, his expression becoming more serious. "Yes, I remember those cases. We never managed to solve them. These items might be related." He paused, thinking. "We need to take this to the police station. I have some contacts who can help us identify the people in these photographs." Back at Chris's house, the two friends sat at the kitchen table, spreading the items out. Fumaça, sitting beside them, watched everything intently. Cris picked up one of the photographs and studied it more closely. It showed a young woman with a radiant smile, but something in her expression seemed sad. "This woman, I think I know her," said Cris, frowning in concentration. "She looked a lot like someone who lived around here, but that was many years ago." João took the photograph from Chris's hands and compared it with the missing persons reports he had gotten from his contacts. "Yes, this is Jane Hopkins. She disappeared about 10 years ago. We never found any clues about her whereabouts." The mystery was deepening, and both Cris and João knew they were only scratching the surface. They needed more information, and perhaps more help. Cris and João realized they needed more help to unravel the mystery. João suggested contacting a criminal psychology expert, Rebecca Rice, who had assisted the police in several complicated cases in the past. Cris agreed, knowing that Rebecca could bring a new perspective. The next morning, Rebecca arrived at Chris's house. She was an imposing woman with piercing eyes that seemed to see through people. Seeing the objects and photographs, she immediately grasped the gravity of the situation. "This is not just a case of disappearance," Rebecca said, in a calm, controlled voice. "We are likely dealing with a case of kidnapping and possibly murder. We need to act quickly." She suggested they return to the location where Cris found the bag to look for more clues. Armed with new information and a renewed sense of urgency, the three headed into the forest, with Fumaça leading the way. Upon reaching the tree, Rebecca carefully examined the surrounding area. "There's something here," she said, pointing to marks on the ground. "It looks like someone has been digging." Cris and João began to dig, feeling the tension rise with each shovel of earth removed. Finally, they found a small, rusty and dirty metal box, buried a few meters deep. Opening it, they found more personal items, including letters and a diary. Rebecca picked up the diary and began to read it. Its pages were filled with detailed entries about Jane Hopkins' life, describing her growing fear of someone who was stalking her. The last entries were particularly disturbing, suggesting she knew her time was running out. "She was afraid of someone," Rebecca said, looking at Cris and João. "Someone she knew. We need to find out who this person was." Cris, João and Rebecca returned to Chris's house with the new box of evidence. They sat at the kitchen table, spreading out the found objects. Fumaça, always alert, was beside them, watching every move intently. "Jane mentions a name in several entries," Rebecca said, flipping through the diary. "She talks about an E repeatedly. It could be a clue." João frowned as he read one of the letters. "We need to see if we can identify someone with these initials in the records. I'll contact my old colleagues at the police and see what they can find." While João made the calls, Rebecca continued to read Jane's diary aloud. The entries described a relationship that started promisingly but quickly became abusive and controlling. Jane wrote about how E followed her, appeared in unexpected places, and his threats became increasingly sinister. "She was trapped in a cycle of fear and manipulation," Rebecca said, her voice tinged with sadness. "We need to find out who this man is." João returned with a grim expression. "I found something," he said. In the police records, there was a man named Eduardo Medeiros, known for his abusive behavior. He was Jane's boyfriend at the time of her disappearance. "That makes sense," Rebecca replied, "but why was he never arrested?" "Lack of evidence," João said. "He had a solid alibi, and we never found anything that directly linked him to Jane's disappearance." Cris closed his eyes for a moment, trying to process the information. "So we're dealing with someone dangerous and cunning. We need to be careful." Rebecca suggested they visit Eduardo Medeiros' old house, which was not far from the forest where the tree was located. "There might be something there that can give us more clues," she said. The next morning, the three of them, accompanied by Fumaça, set off towards Eduardo's house. The abandoned structure exuded a sense of neglect and decay. "We need to be careful," João warned. "We don't know what we might find here." Rebecca led the search, examining each room carefully. The house was filled with personal items, many of which were covered in dust and cobwebs. In the basement, they found a room full of photographs and newspaper clippings, all related to Jane Hopkins. "He was obsessed with her," Cris murmured, looking at the images spread across the walls. "This is disturbing." Fumaça, who had been quiet until then, began to sniff intensely in a specific area of the basement. He scratched the floor, indicating that there was something there. Cris and João started to remove the debris and eventually found a hidden door in the floor. "Oh my God," Rebecca said, her heart racing. "What's down here?" Carefully, Cris, João and Rebecca opened the hidden door revealed by Fumaça. A wooden staircase descended into an even deeper basement. With flashlights in hand, they descended slowly, with Fumaça leading the way, ever alert. The air was damp and carried a strong smell of mold. At the bottom of the basement, they found a small room with concrete walls. In the center of the room was an old, rusty chair with chains attached to it. Cris felt a chill run down his spine. "Jane must have been kept here," Rebecca said, horrified. "He locked her up down here." João examined the walls, finding nail marks and scratches. "She tried to escape," he said softly, "but never made it." Fumaça began sniffing frantically again, this time towards a corner of the room. When they removed the debris, they found a small metal box, similar to the one they had found in the tree. Inside were more letters written by Jane, describing her captivity and desperate attempts to escape. "We have all the evidence we need," Rebecca said, her hands trembling. "We need to take this to the police immediately." With the new evidence in hand, the three knew they were a step closer to solving the mystery of Jane Hopkins's disappearance. But they were also aware that Eduardo Medeiros was still out there, and they needed to be prepared to face him. Back at Cris's house, the atmosphere was tense. They sat at the kitchen table, spreading out the new finds and discussing their next steps. Fumaça, ever vigilant, stayed beside them, watching everything intently. "We need to take this to the station as soon as possible," Cris said, "but we need to be prepared for anything." Rebecca agreed. "We have to stick together and stay alert. Eduardo knows we're getting close to the truth, and he might try to stop us." As night fell, the sense of imminent danger increased. Cris, João and Rebecca knew they were about to uncover a deadly secret and needed to be ready to face whatever came next. Fumaça, ever loyal, was ready to protect them, guiding them in their quest for the truth. With the decision made, Cris, João, Rebecca and Fumaça prepared for the next morning. They knew the final confrontation with Eduardo Medeiros was near and needed to be ready for anything. At dawn, they took the evidence and headed to the police station. On the way, Fumaça was more vigilant than ever, sniffing the air and growling softly. They arrived at the station and were greeted by Captain Rodrigues, an experienced officer who knew João well. "Good to see you," Rodrigues said, taking the diary and letters. "We'll review this evidence and put Eduardo Medeiros behind bars." As the investigators analyzed the new findings, Cris, João, Rebecca and Fumaça waited anxiously. The tension in the air was palpable. Rodrigues returned with a serious expression. "We found something disturbing," he said. "Eduardo Medeiros is linked to several disappearances over the years in different locations. He never stayed in one place long enough to raise suspicion." Cris felt a chill. How many other victims could there be? "We don't know for sure," Rodrigues replied. "But with this new evidence, we can finally catch him." With the police now on Eduardo's trail, Cris, João, Rebecca and Fumaça decided to stay together at Cris's house, with a police patrol stationed nearby. Fumaça, tireless and vigilant, seemed to sense that the end was near. Throughout the night, he continued to patrol the house, growling softly at the slightest sign of movement outside. In the early hours of the morning, a loud noise broke the silence, glass breaking. Cris woke instantly, with Fumaça already on alert. João and Rebeca also got up quickly, grabbing their flashlights and improvised weapons. "He's here," Cris said, heart pounding. "Stay together and follow Fumaça." Fumaça led them through the house, his keen instincts guiding them safely. When they reached the living room, they saw a dark figure near the broken window. Eduardo Medeiros was there, his face twisted with hatred and madness. "You shouldn't have meddled," Eduardo snarled, holding a gun. "Jane got what she deserved and you'll have the same fate." Before he could act, Fumaça lunged at him, barking fiercely and attacking his armed hand. The gun fell to the ground with a thud, and João and Cris quickly overpowered Eduardo, pinning him down. "You're finished, Eduardo," João said, breathless. "The police are on their way." Officers entered the house, handcuffing Eduardo and taking him to the station. Captain Rodriguez, observing the scene, nodded to Cris and his friends. "Good job," he said. "We finally got him." In the days that followed, news of Eduardo Medeiros' capture spread through the community, bringing a sense of justice to the victims' families. Jane Hopkins finally had her peace, and her story could be told. Cris, João, Rebeca, and Fumaça felt relieved, but knew the work wasn't entirely finished. The investigation into other disappearances would continue, but with Eduardo out of the picture, they could breathe a little easier. Fumaça, the faithful hero, would receive special recognition for his role in capturing Eduardo, once again proving that the loyalty and instinct of a dog are truly invaluable. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to subscribe to the channel and leave a like, because I always bring stories like this for you.